The most important thing is we're a government that listens.
In backing down on these short-sighted cuts, Premier Ford did the right thing.
But we have to send a very clear message. The status quo is not working.
After weeks of skirmishes, the Ford government calls a truce in a bitter battle over the cuts to municipal funding. After increasing pressure from the city, an aggressive publicity campaign, and polling showing Ford's popularity sinking and public anger rising, the province has changed course tonight on its cuts to municipal funding. Lisa Shing joins us live now from Queen's Park. And Lisa, this is not the first time they've been forced to back down.
Well, Dwight, I think it's safe to say the government has made several contentious decisions since taking power. Remember way back when they wanted to open the Greenbelt for development? That drew the ire of the public, so they went back on that. More recently, it was their plan for autism that spawned protest after protest. So eventually the government reversed course on that, and now we're seeing a lot of pressure from municipalities.
Morning. We got quite the crew here.
An admission from the Premier today.
Are we right 1,000% of the time? I wish we were right 1,000% of the time.
The province is backtracking on this year's cuts to municipal funding that emerged after the spring budget. That's about $80 million from licensed childcare, consolidating 59 ambulance services into 10, amalgamating 35 public health units to 10, and changing the way those units would share costs with the province.
We came to the conclusion there's savings, but they need more time.
Ford nor his ministers went as far as to say the government made a mistake.
We've had a very robust consultation with our Ontario's municipalities.
We're a government that listens.
I call it listening.
The government indeed listened, though to be fair, Ontario municipalities have been increasingly critical and vocal of these cuts over the last month. London and Ottawa officials have spoken out about losing millions from health to policing. The City of Toronto launched a publicity campaign that included this petition with 31,000 signatures so far. This past weekend, Mayor John Tory knocked on doors in a PC MPP's riding. Today, big city mayors applauded the province's decision. The announcement comes as the Progressive Conservatives' popularity has plunged in recent polls, though Ford said today the reversal has nothing to do with that.
It's the only poll that's going to count in 4 years. And the question is going to be, is this province better off than it was 4 years prior?
Granted, Ford says Ontario's cities acknowledge there is a budget to balance.
They just needed a little more time to make sure that they can find those efficiencies.
But the opposition is asking why there wasn't consultation and time before the cuts were announced.
Any government worth its salt would have the conversation with partners in advance of massive cuts retroactive to their budgets.
The Premier acts first, thinks later, and then when the
Now, keep in mind, and it's important to point out that these cuts really are just for this year. Any future cuts will continue.
Okay, Lisa, now the province did announce last week it's giving money to cities for so-called audits to find efficiencies. What's happening with that plan?
Well, that is still on the table, and the ministers reiterated that today, that $7.3 million for municipalities to hire auditors and consultants to find out where exactly they can trim. That's still there, and they told us today that several cities have already taken up the government on that offer, Dwight.
Thank you, Lisa. Today's About Face from Premier Ford marks a political win for Toronto's council. City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly explains why councillors aren't taking off the gloves just yet.
The retroactive cuts that were announced and the arbitrary cost share reduction was foolish from the beginning. We're looking forward to now being able to reset and start from scratch.
For more than a month, Joe Cressy has been pushing the province to reverse cuts to public health.
To the tens of thousands of people who signed petitions, made phone calls, knocked on doors, this victory would not have been possible without each and every one of you.
Am I going up here? Just this weekend, Mayor John Tory was speaking to residents as part of the city's efforts to pressure Premier Ford's government. Meanwhile, an online petition was gaining steam with more than 31,000 signatures in 5 days.
You just have to sign right here.
Outside advocacy groups also joined the fight.
We use online tools, an email tool that sends a message directly to the local member of provincial parliament, the Premier, and the Minister of Health. 11,000 people used that tool to say that they were opposed to these cuts.
Every mayor I've talked to says, I know there's savings, we just need more time. So we're going to give the mayors more time. We're going to work with them.
But a bit of time is all municipalities are getting when it comes to cuts to childcare, public health, and paramedics.
In the days, weeks, and months ahead, we must all continue to stand up and speak out to ensure that any future cuts to our vital public health and childcare services do not proceed.
Budget Chief Gary Crawford says at least the city's 2019 budget is now balanced, so services won't be slashed.
What have you been told about what this means for 2020, 2021?
Well, I think what this means is it opens the door for a collaborative conversation with the province.
The question now is what comes next? More reversals from the province or just this one-time reprieve? What's clear for the city is this fight is far from over. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Our Queen's Park reporter joins us live now with more on this. And Mike, with the recent tough talk by the Premier in his war of words with municipalities, does this government now backing down come as a surprise at Queen's Park?
Well, you know, honestly, Dwight, I'm not that surprised by it because remember that all this government is doing is postponing the cuts. Really, they're delaying the funding cuts until next year. And it's also not a surprise because this government was taking an absolute hammering. You had John Tory, the Mayor of Toronto, winning the PR war, going after the government about the unfairness of cutting the municipal budget effectively in the middle of the municipal budget year. But then there was also polling, 3 successive polls in a row, all indicating that support for the Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives was dropping all across Ontario. And you had this happening in the months leading up to a federal election. So there was concern by a lot of Conservatives about what was going on.
Okay, Mike. The government also introducing legislation today to scrap its contract with the beer store and pave the way for beer sales in corner stores. We heard the mayor talking about this. The big question here is how much is it going to cost the province to get out of this contract?
You know, we don't have a number for sure on that, but sources in the beer industry are telling me that the Ford government could be on the hook, taxpayers on the hook, for hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation to the beer store for breaking this contract. Look, Finance Minister Vic Fedeli, he simply wasn't wanting to talk about those numbers today. He was really wanting to try to pin the blame on the previous government.
This backroom deal that was done, this Kathleen Wynne deal, was bad for the people of Ontario, and we've always worked on all options to bring choice, convenience, and fairness to the people.
Now, the beer store is already threatening legal action over the government's move to scrap this contract. In a statement, the beer store president says, "We have today sent a legal letter to the government and will fight this legislation vigorously through the courts." Now, my sources on both sides of this issue are telling me that the government's legislation really was a negotiating tactic, that they dropped this to try to put pressure on the beer store to come to a deal. Now, meanwhile, the talks between the province and the beer store are still going on, but Vic Fedeli says that if this legislation passes before the Queen's Park breaks for the summer, the government is going to start to put in place what it needs to allow for the sales of beer from convenience stores, from big box stores, and from more grocery stores. Dwight?
I know you'll be keeping an eye on this one for us. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
So we heard what the coalition that runs the beer store thinks of the plan. We also talked to one craft brewer today that is on board with the idea of beer in corner stores.
It would be good for our business, I believe. You know, being able to have other stores in Ontario that could curate a product offering where we would be matched, maybe not so much large craft or macro in the store, similar to kind of like the US model.
Blood Brothers Brewing is a small brewery in the city's West End. While they like the idea, they're also concerned that canceling the contract with the beer store could end up costing taxpayers. They prefer to see the corner store sales happen after the contract expires.
I didn't lose my voice, I found my voice.
From this small stage at a Markham Stouffville Farmers Market, Jane Philpott makes big waves across the country. I'm Chris Glover. Coming up, how she's now running as an independent in the next election. And she says she's not afraid of anyone. But what do her constituents think? That's coming up.
Our city remains under a shoreline hazard warning as Lake Ontario water levels continue to rise. The soaking we got over the weekend definitely did not help things.
The water level, the 24-hour average water level on Lake Ontario here locally in Toronto was about 75.86 meters. Now, by comparison, that's only 7 centimeters shy of the record levels we saw in 2017.
We got hit with about 28 millimeters of rain on Saturday. Conservation Authority officials say Lake Ontario water levels are expected to peak in the next 6 to 9 days. The Toronto Islands, of course, are particularly at risk, and they're already seeing flooding there. This photo was posted to Reddit over the weekend, showing a resident out for a paddle in a canoe. That's the new way to walk the dog. Or canoe the dog. Let's check in with Colette. I was at Echo Beach on the weekend for the big CBC Music Festival. We're getting some rain down there, but what was incredible to see, some of the water actually passed the shoreline and was actually on lakeshore, like the lake was on the lakeshore.
Right, moving right in. I know, and you know, it's so important to kind of look at not only the rainfall, Dwight, when you have situations like that, but the winds and the wind direction. And you know, we have another system that's going to be moving in over these next 24 hours, and winds will be a component to it, and an easterly wind, which isn't that helpful for the islands, depending where you're situated there. Those winds will be gusting at times 30, 40, 50 kilometers an hour that we'll be seeing, especially towards tomorrow morning. The rainfall accumulation with this next system moving through, not terribly heavy, generally in that 10 to 15 millimeter corridor, but there's the risk of some thunderstorms, so locally there could be some heavier amounts through there. Beautiful day, lots of sunshine early, and then the clouds kind of rolling through, so 21 degrees is the current temperature with a little more of that cloud cover, and this next system that I'm talking about that's going to be bringing that rainfall, you can see it back here over the upper Great Lakes and the impact it's having. So that moving in a little bit late tonight, but especially towards tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning's commute is likely going to be a slower one because it's going to be a wet one as well to contend with. A look at how this is going to push through the area then. Through the overnight hours, it'll be spotty as it comes in, a little bit patchy, but even late this evening, we could start to see some sprinkles moving through. Then overnight towards tomorrow morning, some heavier stuff, still holding on into the afternoon, but it gets lighter, that's for sure. But even tomorrow evening, some isolated showers could still be lingering. Overnight tonight, then temperatures going down to about 9 degrees. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll probably be lucky, frankly, to get to that 14 degrees, Dwight. A real departure from today.
That's not lucky, Colette.
Okay, well, it is if it could have been 12 or 13.
Good point. We'll bug you later. Thank you.
All right.
O great one who summons me, I stand by my oath, loyalty to wishes 3. I'm kidding. Watch this.
Watch out! You done wound me up. You ain't never had a friend like me.
And it looks like the new live-action Aladdin movie has over 100 million friends. The movie produced magical numbers this weekend. We will break it all down for you after the break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You look like a prince on the outside.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Fans unable to contain their excitement after the Toronto Raptors made history this weekend, beating the Milwaukee Bucks to advance to the NBA Finals for the first time ever. Fans spilled onto the streets, onto buses, and even onto cop cars. Toronto police say surprisingly there were no arrests, and of course the players who made history for us were all smiles, celebrating in their own ways. Oh, so proud of our city. No problems after that big win. The defending champion Golden State Warriors are coming to town for Game 1 of the NBA Finals on Thursday. Now, it appears they're not the only ones. The Raptors' playoff run has been a big boost for tourism in Toronto. Greg Ross has that part of the story.
24 seasons in the making. The Toronto Raptors are headed to their first NBA Finals.
The city is still buzzing 2 days after the Raptors clinched a berth in the NBA Finals for the first time in franchise history.
I understand the excitement in the city. It's great, right? Somebody grabbed me right after the game the other night and said one comment, and I said this is an awesome city, man. I'm really happy for the fans here.
Raptors shooting guard Danny Green went to the NBA Finals twice with the San Antonio Spurs, but says he's never seen anything like this.
It's been crazy, man. It's been wild. I thought it was wild in San Antonio, but here is another level.
And that excitement could mean a big boost to the city's economy.
This is a big deal for Toronto.
Matt McNamara with Toronto Tourism says hosting the NBA Finals should have an immediate impact on tourism in the city.
Bars are filled, hotels are packed, restaurants are all booked up.
Let's go Raptors! He says the Raptors have done a great job of making Toronto a national team, and as a result, fans are flocking from all over the country.
That's why We the North has been so successful, is that they've managed to weave the Canadianness of the Raptors into their DNA. So this entire country is rallying around them. So we have people coming from Halifax and Vancouver into the city to experience the Raptors and be part of that vibe.
McNamara says this could be a big boost to the city long-term as well, with the NBA Finals being broadcast all over the world.
Most people think of Toronto as a cold destination, but now they're seeing Jurassic Park internationally. 20,000 people out in the streets in shorts and T-shirts celebrating the city.
According to Tourism Toronto, 44 million people visited the city last year, spending a record $9 billion. McNamara says the NBA Finals could help set a new record this year. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Don't you dare close your eyes. Hold your breath, it gets better. I'm like a shooting star. I've come so far. Let me share this whole new world with you.
A whole new Aladdin conquered a whole new world at a weekend box office. The film spun its magic to have the best Memorial Day weekend opening in 5 years. Yelena Adzik is here with all the details.
And Dwight's going to sing again.
I'm not going to sing a whole new world like I did last week. Let's break down these numbers. I'm so happy because a Toronto kid is starring in this film and we want to do well.
Mina Massoud, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about those numbers. Hardcore, first place, really did well. We're talking about $207 million US worldwide, and North American box office, we're looking at $112.7 million. And that's over the 4-day weekend. This is according to the box office numbers. And in the U.S. is Memorial Day weekend. Disney's done very well for there. There you get a chance to look at Will Smith. People early on were, and some of the critics, there are some that are mixed out there, but a lot are saying that the casting certainly is admirable. And that brings us to your point when you bring up the young actor, Mina Massoud. This is a man, 27 years of age. And, he did know of course, Aladdin before the animated film. He says it's a folk tale, very prevalent in Egypt, but he was also aware of, the stereotypes of Arabs. And he really was cautious about how it was going to be represented in this particular movie. Well, Disney, obviously, they could not play this the way that they've done so in the past. They needed to bring it up to date. So not only did they have this worldwide casting, more than 2,000 hopefuls auditioned for his role. He got it. And also British actress Naomi Scott, she plays Jasmine. She's of Indian descent, and actors with Iranian, Tunisian roots are also in the movie. So this is something that is important to him. He says that although he did see the original film, this was back in 1992 when it came out, he says when it was time to do this one, I was not going to rewatch it. He decided to have some fresh eyes. And he also just really is cognizant of his roots, and that includes his time here in Toronto. So let's have a listen to him right now.
Toronto means a lot to me. You know, I've grown up here. I've learned a lot here, and not just acting. You know, I trained here, not just acting, but about life as well. So to be able to bring it back is it's exhilarating. It feels right. You know.
I love that he brought his drama teachers to the red carpet last week. That was so sweet. So sweet. Toronto kid, there's something else happening in Toronto right now. You know, this basketball thing.
No.
I think that young kid may be a fan.
It was so cute. He ends up posting this on Instagram. He just happened to be there at a pretty seminal moment. Take a look.
To be in this building right now as a Raptor fan, as a kid from Markham who played basketball, how big is this moment for you and a chance to go to the finals?
This is literally the best way to end a press tour right here. It's amazing. Probably the biggest game we've had since you know, the Vince Carter game in Philly. So this is amazing.
That's Mina Masood enjoying life, not just on the screen in Aladdin, but also clearly courtside.
There you go. So tell all your friends in Cali there, Mr. Masood, that to come up and get a beating from our Raptors. Thanks, Yelena.
See you soon, Dwight.
Police have arrested a 31-year-old man in connection to a motorcycle hit and run that left a 4-year-old boy in a coma. Security cameras captured the suspects riding on this maroon-red Harley-Davidson motorcycle shortly before Radhawal Chowdhury, the was hit. The driver has been charged with failure to remain at the scene, and police say he also did not have a license. Family members of the boy say he's in critical condition with a serious brain injury.
Family is devastated and they're all crying, and there are lots of extended family here, so they're getting lots of support. Everybody's there and talking, giving them comfort.
Family members say doctors are waiting another 24 hours for Chowdhury to come out of his coma. The accused, who police are not naming, will appear in court tomorrow morning.
He said that he's going to sell our house whether we like it or not, because we're not allowed to own our house after you're 65 years old.
Tricked into selling their home after owning it for 25 years. How a realtor told this visually impaired man and his wife they had to sell their house, a process that has cost them tens of thousands of dollars. We'll bring you our investigation a little later in the show. Okay, Khaled, let's talk about these numbers again. You were throwing them at us before. We were at seasonal over the weekend, I thought, on Sunday, right?
Yeah, we were doing pretty well. I mean, I know Saturday was a bit hit and miss. We did very well on Sunday. And yeah, talking about those numbers, I can show you right here, Dwight, how things were stacking up through today, because what a nice day. We're actually ahead of the game in terms of if we compare ourselves to a seasonal high. So 22.5 is unofficial. We'll round that up to 23 today. I know it was so nice with the sunshine. The clouds built in later in the day, but really quite gorgeous. Average high this time of year is about 21, so really close. In terms of our low, we were on the mild side of things by a few degrees, but again, I really think it's the afternoon highs we tend to care more about than sometimes those overnight lows. The current temperature is still hanging in there in the low 20s around not only the Toronto area, but over towards the Oshawa area, Hamilton, St. Catharines, all through the GTA and beyond. We're seeing those temperatures nice, and although the clouds are here, it's still dry into the early part of this evening. Things will be changing, though, later on. As we approach midnight, we increase the chance of seeing the showers. The system is back to the west of us. You can see somewhat extensive over the upper Great Lakes. How it plays out for us is we get that chance through the overnight. Should be light stuff or a bit patchy as it comes in, but it gets heavier and more consistent towards the morning hours. That's why I've been saying the morning commute, I think, is going to be one of those slower ones, because it will be wet throughout the area and all the way around towards Burlington, over towards Hamilton, down towards Niagara, throughout the whole Golden Horseshoe, going to be finding the wet conditions. Okay, into the afternoon, still the cloud cover in place, but we'll see it drying out a little bit. A few spotty showers possible. In fact, that risk lingers even into the evening hours, but it'll definitely be less than what we're going to see early in the day. So keep that in mind. That's for Tuesday. Into Wednesday, again, we're going to see the potential for some rain early, and then things should improve into the latter part of the day. I'll show you that in the 5-day forecast. Overnight tonight, though, lows of 9 to 10 degrees. Wet conditions moving in. Tomorrow, a big struggle. These temperatures may be on the high side, frankly, for where we're going to get mid-teens, so well below seasonal. We'll be seeing Wednesday, early chance of showers, otherwise some cloud cover, 16. Thursday, we may see some showers. Actually, things are starting to look a little bit better for Thursday, but 17. And then if we have to take it at some point during the week, don't we want it at the end towards the weekend? High pressure is going to be moving in, and I think things will be drying out and more sunshine for us, too.
At least we got some sunshine for Bike to Work Day. Today was perfect for that.
That's right. Did you bike?
I did not today.
I didn't either. I admit it. But I'm glad we have them.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
I'm going as hard as I can. He just didn't believe me.
His car impounded and license suspended twice. This man says the reason behind it is his severe breathing issues. We'll bring you his story a little later in the show. A disabled couple say they were tricked into selling their home after owning it for 25 years. They say a real estate agent fooled them into signing a listing agreement. John Lancaster now with these exclusive details.
Want number 1 first, and then there's a 2 that goes side to side.
Harold Verge is blind. The 72-year-old makes a modest living weaving cane and fixing chairs. Last month, he and his wife say they were forced out of their home on Connaught Avenue near Queen and Greenwood when it was sold against their will.
I think he tricked us into it. My wife feels the same way. He tricked us into it.
The Verges say Royal LePage, your community realty agent, Vince Iannello, offered to help the couple renew their 2 mortgages. They say they didn't realize they were also signing a listing agreement until it was too late.
He said he's going to sell our house whether we like it or not, because we're not allowed to own our house after you're 65 years old.
There are no laws preventing seniors from owning property. CBC News has learned Ianello didn't list the Verge's home on MLS, the website realtors use to attract a large pool of potential buyers. Instead, the home was sold internally to the client of a fellow Royal LePage agent. The price, $675,000.
And it appears that the property was grossly undersold.
The Verges have since hired lawyer Charles Wagman. He says the home was appraised at $750,000. Other semis on the street have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars more than that. Wagman says the couple was fooled.
There was pressure because of the idea that they had to sell. They weren't entitled at law to own property anymore.
Ianello declined to answer questions from CBC News. In an email, he said he's never wavered from caring about the well-being of his clients. I was surprised to be contacted by the CBC regarding these allegations. My commitment to the Verges is genuine, and I am disappointed that no further details can be provided by me at this time due to the potential for litigation. The Verges are now renting a small bungalow. They don't have enough money to buy another home.
I wake up in the middle of the night tormented and in fear what's going to happen next.
John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
The Ontario government says it plans to join British Columbia's proposed class action lawsuit against dozens of opioid manufacturers.
Ontario has witnessed a major increase in opioid-related deaths, hospitalizations, and emergency department visits over the last decade. In simple terms, it's a crisis. It is a crisis that has come with tremendous costs, both in terms of lives lost and the pressures it has put on our healthcare systems and on our communities.
BC filed the proposed class action late last year in a bid to recoup the healthcare costs associated with opioid addiction. The suit alleges that more than 40 manufacturers and wholesalers falsely marketed opioids as less addictive than other pain drugs and helped trigger an overdose crisis that has killed thousands since OxyContin was introduced to the Canadian market back in 1996.
A variety of strategies are needed to respond to this crisis. Later today, the Ontario government will introduce the proposed Foundations for Promoting and Protecting Mental Health and Addiction Services Act 2019. The legislation would support Ontario's ability to sue opioid manufacturers and wholesalers for their alleged wrongdoing in order to recover past and future healthcare costs paid by Ontario taxpayers due to opioid-related disease, injury, or illness.
Maroney adds any money earned in the legal action will be funneled into the province's mental health and addiction services. A BC driver with severe breathing issues says new breathalyzer rules are causing undue hardship for people with disabilities. The man has had his car impounded and driver's license suspended twice. New federal legislation allows police across the country to pull over any vehicle and force the driver to take a breath test. And that has led to calls to accommodate the needs of people with disabilities. Erica Johnson has more.
Wait, how to hold you?
Jimmy Forster has chronic lung disease, making him short of breath, and he limps from a brain injury. In March, after filling up his car at this gas station one morning, an RCMP officer pulled him over, demanded a breath test. Forster says he couldn't blow hard enough to get a reading.
He just said, blow harder, blow harder. I said, I'm blowing as hard as I can, sir. Sir, I said, I'm blowing as hard as I can. He just didn't believe me.
It's estimated there are almost 200,000 Canadians with severe asthma, 2 million with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Forster has both. In BC, anyone who refuses or, like Jimmy Forster, is unable to do a breath test has their car impounded, their license suspended for 90 days. In other provinces, it could lead to a criminal charge.
I'm scared.
It's the second time in as many months Forster hasn't been able to do a breath test. The first time, an adjudicator dismissed the case and he got his car and license back. This respirologist says it can be difficult to assess in the field whether people have chronic lung disease.
There likely are people that do have lung function that's so low that they can't do the test, and just identifying them on the spot it just seems very difficult.
Go Public has tracked down other cases in BC and Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick, all people with chronic lung disease or other disabilities who say they too were unable to provide a breath test.
I'm not going to say it's easy for police at roadside to make all of these determinations, but there should be some level of inquiry in situations like this.
In a statement from the RCMP, a media spokesperson said RCMP officers use their training, experience, and judgment to identify legitimate inability to provide a breath sample. Jimmy Forster spends his days worrying his license will get pulled again.
I can't sleep at night. I cannot.
With no indication he's touched a drink. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We will be right back.
This market update is brought to you by SSQ Insurance, reminding you that stronger communities make every person stronger.
In this election, I will be running as an independent candidate.
I am going to run in the federal election as an independent candidate for the people of Markham-Stouffville.
The mystery is over. We now know what's next for ousted Liberal MPs Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. The pair made the announcement in separate news conferences today. Our Chris Glover was at Jane Philpott's gathering in Markham for us today. And Chris, this wasn't exactly a surprise.
No, it wasn't really a surprise, but it definitely has a lot of national importance. And part of the reason for that is Jane Philpott today, she criticized the political party system, which is something that has operated in Canada right from the beginning. And she said that for the first time ever, she would be able to vote based on her conscience and what the people here in Markham-Stouffville wanted, instead of having to follow party rules. Jane Philpott meets with supporters at a farmer's market in Markham-Stouffville.
It's actually really exciting. It is. You can feel a buzz in the air.
Philpott won Laura Hogue's vote away from the Conservatives in the last election. The Markham-Stouffville voter says no matter which party Philpott chooses, she's backing her.
She has a lot of integrity. and someone I think that we can really trust. She's proven herself, too.
I know you're all wondering what color I was going to wear today.
Wearing neutral white, Philpott announced she would run as an independent.
We need political will, and who better to build political will than independent voices that aren't afraid of anybody?
Philpott and fellow former Liberal cabinet minister Jody Wilson-Raybould were kicked out of caucus after quitting Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Philpott accused the Prime Minister and other officials of improperly pressuring the Attorney General to stop a criminal prosecution of a Montreal engineering giant.
I didn't lose my voice, I found my voice. There is no longer a political party telling me what to say. There's no longer a political staffer telling me how to vote.
A physician prior to politics and Trudeau's first health minister, Philpott was seen as a star in his cabinet. She says she was in discussions with the Green Party and the NDP.
And I had great conversations with several other parties and lots of enthusiasm, but none of them sat exactly right. And I felt in my heart of hearts that the independent option would allow me to be able to have people who may have had allegiances with another party in the past.
When she left the Liberals, all but 2 of the board members on her local riding association quit to now help with her re-election bid as a solo act.
I did not like the way that Jane was removed from caucus. I felt that we had lost an absolute star candidate. That was one thing. The other reason was I don't think we were treated very well by the party. We were not consulted, we were not asked, we were given no advice whatsoever, and quite frankly, we caught them quite by surprise.
We're appealing across different platforms, different constituencies and so on. You know, Jane doesn't bring any baggage in that sense, so I think we've got a good shot. It'll be interesting. It'll be a fun campaign.
Philpott and Wilson-Raybould say they worked closely to come to today's decision. But for neighboring GTA Liberal members, this continued public spat could seriously impact their chances.
Well, I wish her well in the fall 2019 election, and she'll go to her constituents as will I.
I think anything's possible in politics these days.
Despite losing the money and power of a political party, Philpott says she's got Markham Stouffville all locked up.
Well, I'm not worried about this riding. We're gonna get out there.
And if she is to be re-elected, she already laid out a couple of her priorities. One of those is Indigenous rights. Another one is climate change. And you'll remember that those are 2 of the biggest priorities for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and as he is seeking re-election as well. So it'll be interesting to see how many times, if both she and the government is re-elected, it'll be interesting to see how many times she supports the government that she has now stepped away from.
Chris Glover in Markham Stouffville tonight. Thank you, Chris. Julie Van Duzen is following developments in Ottawa for us. So, Julie, the big question is, will voters send them back to Ottawa as independent MPs?
Well, that route tends to be a struggle. Independents don't win easily. That's what history shows us. And, the reason, of course, is they don't have the infrastructure that other candidates do that are attached to parties. They don't have the backing of headquarters, the literature that comes with belonging to a party, the financing, and so on. Just think of recent history, a few examples. John Nunziata, 1997, went from Liberals to Independents over a dispute he had with the party. Chuck Cadman, Canadian Alliance, then became an independent in 2004. Bill Casey was a Conservative in Nova Scotia, became a independent and won handily because he was so well known and so well liked in the riding with 69%. These 2 are very well known, very high profile, but no one knows what the issues will be on election day. But it's usually a difficult task for sure.
There was wide speculation that they would join Elizabeth May and the Green Party. Did they explain today why that did not happen?
Well, everyone thought, a lot of people thought for sure, and it was a distinct possibility. Even Elizabeth May today said right up until Friday, a couple of days ago, she thought it could happen. They both said in their separate news conferences that they liked Elizabeth May, liked her policies on climate change and on housing, Indigenous reconciliation. However, they both seemed very reluctant to attach themselves to a party, any party at this time, even though Elizabeth May said on Parliament Hill today that she said to both of them, do either of you want to be leader of the party? I mean, she is looking for a succession plan at one point, and she said, I want to make it a better party, a bigger party, but she said they weren't remotely interested in that. So take a listen to Elizabeth May.
All I can conclude is that their feelings of deep unhappiness at their involvement with another political party, the Liberal Party, left them feeling they weren't ready to jump in to join another party.
So, Dwight, as I said, it won't be easy, especially since, even though Elizabeth May says, I love them, they're my friends, she will be running a candidate in that riding for the Greens, and so too will the Liberals. So it won't be a cakewalk.
Before we let you go, Julie, what are their fellow MPs saying about their plans today?
Well, everyone's being very civil, let's put it this way. I think the fact that the two of them are out of the party was probably a sad day for quite a lot of Liberals and for them as well. So Liberals are wishing them well, but reminding everybody that they will be running a candidate there.
Julie Van Duzen joining us from Ottawa today. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
It's going to be a fun election. With U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs now out of the way, the Trudeau government is inching toward validating the new Canada-U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement.
It would have been difficult to move ahead with ratification while the 232 tariffs were still in place. Now that they have been lifted, our government intends to move ahead with ratification of the new NAFTA. Insofar as possible, we intend to move in tandem with the United States.
Chrystia Freeland paved the way for validation by introducing a pre-ratification procedural motion this afternoon. No actual date has been set for ratification. The trade deal agreement in principle was signed on November 30th. The existing NAFTA agreement remains in effect until all three countries ratify it, but Democrats in Washington are still pushing for tighter labor laws and other changes. Buffy Sainte-Marie graced the stage this weekend at CBC Music Fest, and I had the pleasure of chatting with her, answering some of your questions for her. After the break, we'll bring you some of her answers. Stay with us. We'll be right back. There's a big change in the works for one of CBC Radio 1's most popular shows, and Maria Tremonti is leaving the Current next month. She has hosted the program since it launched back in 2002, and Maria is also known to TV viewers as a foreign correspondent and host of The Fifth Estate. She is not leaving CBC, rather she is starting a new venture, producing and hosting original podcasts. And Maria's last day at the Current's mic is June 21st. Her podcast will debut this fall, and we will miss her.
Love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles fly on a mountain high.
Did you know she was one of the people who actually wrote that song? It won her an Academy Award, the only Indigenous person to have won one. Buffy St. Marie performing at CBC Music Fest this weekend. Not only did I have the pleasure of listening to her set, I was able to chat with her during a Facebook Live while taking some of your questions for her. I started, though, by asking her about Sesame Street.
You know, when Sesame Street first invited me to be on, it was just to count from 1 to 10 or say the alphabet like everybody else, and I said no because I was busy. But before we hung up, I said, but have you ever done any Native American Indigenous programming? And they said no, and they called me right back. And I became a cast member for about 5.5 years.
Yeah, that was my time growing up.
It was wonderful, though, because they didn't stereotype me. They didn't only do Indigenous things. We did sibling rivalry.
Yes.
We did segments on breastfeeding, which was the first time ever.
First time you were the one breastfeeding your little
yes,
guy,
I
right?
did. Yeah. And it was so beautiful the way they did it because Big Bird was looking over from his nest. He said, "What you doing, Buffy?" I said, "I'm feeding the baby." And he said, "That's a funny way to feed the baby."
Right?
And
you know, I think I actually remember that episode.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's all over the place. Somebody puts it up, somebody else takes it down. Somebody puts it up, somebody else takes it down.
It was great. And when you started singing, and I'm telling you this because I want to show you how it's continuing. I'm here with my 12-year-old and her friend, and when you started doing Universal Soldier, they both looked at me and they said, "We know that song."
How does they know that?
Their teacher in English class used that song. I'm not sure what the lesson was about, but they knew the words and they learned the song at school.
No
to this
kidding,
day.
no kidding. Well, it's about individual responsibility for war, so it's pretty interesting that they're teaching 12-year-olds that in school now. Things can improve.
Right? Is it that important? Is it still that important to you to make sure that you're making songs that can make a difference? That it's not just about the music, it's also about the message?
Some of the songs are. I would say about maybe 20% of the songs that I've written really do have a message. And yeah, I'm a University of Massachusetts graduate.
Oh, you're Mass at Amherst.
Yes, but I was supposed to be going to India to further my studies in Oriental philosophy because I had a double major, education and Oriental philosophy. But I didn't. Instead, I went to Greenwich Village and singing the songs I'd written all my life. And so really the same message. I was going to a university in India that was dedicated to serving the Creator through the arts. I wound up in show business, but my mission continued to be the same.
Yes.
I was trying to serve the Creator through the arts when I got a chance. So a lot of my songs are love songs, a lot are country songs, you know, a lot are about the countryside or the world we live in, a lot are very sweet, some are children's songs, but then some of them really are I tried to make them very effective protest songs.
Yes.
So it's not about just emoting and being mad at the world. It's about having a solution in your
There's
head.
a message in there.
And trying to make sense, really trying to be effective. That's what I was trying to do. And Indigenous rights and a dedication to alternative conflict resolution, which can be taught. Gandhi, Jesus, Martin Luther King, it can be taught. So I'm encouraging people just to learn, teach each other and learn better ways. We can do it.
We can.
I think.
We really can. Hundreds of cyclists descended on Nathan Phillips Square this morning to mark the city's 30th Bike to Work Day. Cyclists started at Charles and Yonge Streets and rode along Yonge with a police escort. They were able to grab a pancake breakfast and tune up their bikes for free when they arrived at City Hall.
What we do know at the City of Toronto is that every time we put down a separated bike lane, cyclists come in great numbers and they take over. So the demand for cycling is definitely there.
Cycle Toronto says there has been a 1,200% increase in traffic on the Richmond-Adelaide Bike Corridor alone since its launch in 2014, but safety remains a concern for many riders. Toronto Police data shows there were 4 cyclist deaths last year. There are none so far this year, but advocates say more bike lanes are needed to help avoid collisions. City staff are currently working to update the 10-year-old cycling network plan that was approved in 2016. It promised over 500 kilometers of protected lanes on major corridors and painted lanes on residential roads. An updated report will be presented to the city in June. Now, I know my city pretty well, and why can't I picture where this is? Maybe by Cherry Beach somewhere?
I was thinking that too. It looks like the docks area down there.
Any viewers, if you know where this is, tweet at us and let us know where we are. Of course, this is your GTA Today. And remember, get your photos to us by posting them on Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag CBCYourGTA, and we will air some of them on the show.
I like the moody black and white, too.
That was very cool. And I know my city well, and I hate not knowing where that is. So I got to figure that one out.
Information.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
You're so good. All right, that's an excuse for me, and I'm using it. What's up for tomorrow?
Well, we are looking at the chance of showers overnight tonight, but that increases as we go towards the morning hours, and that's why I'm saying you want to allow a little extra time for that morning commute, especially, because I do think that is going to be a wet one. Then as we get into the afternoon, although we're going to have some gusty winds through the day, we should see less precipitation into the afternoon, but still the risk carries on all the way till tomorrow evening. And in most cases, it's going to be that 10 to 15 millimeters of rain, but locally there may be, Dwight, a few isolated thunderstorms, and then we're talking about locally some heavier amounts possible there.
All right. You know, the
It's
grass
a little
needs it.
cooler
That's
tomorrow.
it. Before we go, we got about 10 seconds left. Can we gloat a little bit here that we said the Raptors were going to do it in 6 and it really happened?
I know. I thought we should go back and get
We need to play that tape
video.
again, trying to convince the producer. That's it for us tonight. Mike has you covered. We will see you tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everybody.